obviously we talk about offensive speech quite a bit. And in many cases, we can commonly identify offensive speech, and no one needs to explain that to us. But in other cases, it may be a little bit harder to define. And so if you could help the committee through this just a little bit, and that is, as we look at the report from the commission, how does this impact free speech, not just, say, within the building, but when we start looking at social media, because there's so much going on there? How do we look at this issue when we measure it against social media and the most common ways of transmitting your thoughts these days?
Co-Chair Burdick, Co-Chair Williamson, and Representative Wilson. I've given an entire seminar on this issue. So
sit back.
I won't do that tonight because I know everyone wants to get home to their families. This is a difficult issue, without a doubt. And I think that there are some times when we can see that there will be offensive speech that occurs that nonetheless needs to happen. So how does one define when that is? I think that training is, sort of the core of our recommendations, and I think it starts there. I think that there is a difference, for example, between speech where someone is talking about where they think a particular bill ought to go, and speech that is directed immediately to a person in front of their face. The circumstances of those things, targeting is a big part of it. And the pervasiveness and the way in which it's said mean a lot. Now, that does beg the question of, is somebody going to be disciplined for something that they did not intend to be offensive to another person? And at least in my experience with these issues, many times there might be a complaint made that someone has said something offensive. And when that person is confronted with the complaint and the fact of how others felt about it, they are able to modify their behavior. Maybe they're saying some of the same things, but in a different way. And I think educating others that at times, not always, but at times, their behavior can rise to the level where it basically excludes someone else from a workplace. That's where it really happens, is the education. And in my experience, folks don't normally get disciplined for creating a hostile environment unless and until that discussion has happened. Most folks do not get discipline, particularly the kinds of harsh discipline that I was just discussing over here, unless they have been warned many times and continued to persist. So simply the fact that we have a definition that some things contribute to a hostile environment doesn't mean that the level of punishment that you're describing happens immediately or instantaneously. I hope that begins to answer your question, but obviously it's a very big topic.
If I could follow up, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm a non-lawyer, but looking at this, my mind wants to explode as to where this could go and what could be involved in this process. I think most people, when using social media and folks that use it even in this building, probably never considered the fact that ultimately what they say could wind up with them being re-educated, so to speak, and sanctioned. Wow, that does seem huge.
Senator Burdick, Representative Williamson, and Representative Wilson, I think what I would say to that is that to the extent that that problem exists, it's not created by this group's recommendations. That problem is already a legal problem that exists in our society, and it has been ratified by this legislature many times when amending ORS Chapter 659A, which contains the employment statutes. So while I realize that certain kinds of harassment might be less familiar to everyone, the fact is that our law already recognizes it. And this recommendation is simply provided in order to try to help the legislature to come to grips with that.